The cause of autism is still not known. It's still out in the jury. But some people can relate it to environmental factors, what we are eating, nutrition, the chemicals they use in growing our food, the food that stays on the shelf life. Some people would say it's genetics because we find sometimes 1, 2, 3 children from the same family on the spectrum. And sometimes we have sisters that have a son or a daughter on the spectrum. So some people relate it to genetics, but the truth of the matter is nobody really knows the cause of autism. But we know that there are some things that you can do that can change the course of, I would say, recovery in the children with autism, or progress in the children with autism. Some people claim that children that are born to older parents tend to have children with autism. But in recent times, we are seeing very young families, that come up with children with autism. Okay, the prevalence of autism when we started 16 years ago was 1 in 150. And today is 1 in 44. So it tells you that something is not quite right. We are seeing young families, between the ages of 28, the husband 28, the wife 24, and they have a child with autism. So we can't really relate it like we do with Down syndrome. With Down syndrome, the age of the parents really affects whether they are likely to have a child with Down syndrome or not. But with autism, I can't really say that really correlates. I don't think we have enough data or enough evidence to tell us that, yes, the older the parents, the more likelihood that the child would have autism. Okay, for early detection of children with autism, you can't really tell until the child is 24 months. But for some children, we are now seeing some signs at the early age. When the child is tending to look at his fingers a lot, those are some of the early signs. Goes around fixated on his hands or his fingers, or fixated on lights, looks towards lights, or fixated on things that are inanimate, or is attached to a particular person, object, or environment. You change the environment, the child begins between the ages of 6 months to 9 months. You start seeing subtle changes. So those are something you look out for around that age. But autism is what we call the invisible disorder. What does that tell us? That when you see the child, you can't see that anything is wrong. You can't tell. The child will sit at the right time. The child will crawl at the right time. He would walk at the right time. So by the time the child now starts to get to the age of 2 years old, you now see that, oh, this child is not speaking. That's usually the very first focused sign that something is not quite right. A child at 2 should have words, mommy, take, my, cup. So little things like that you should have seen in that child by the age of 2. That's why we encourage parents, wait till 2 before we now do like a diagnosis. And the diagnoses are done by the medicals. So you need a speech and language therapy, you need a pediatrician, you need a psychologist, to kind of put that together, the team together, to be able to get you your diagnosis. In Nigeria, you may not be able to get everyone at once. What you want to do is to try and see your pediatrician explain, just like you said, as a mother, you will know when something is wrong. Even if the doctor says, no, madam, as a mother, you live with that child 24/7. When the doctor is telling you no, we tell them that this and this and this is what I see, and insist. Because some of them, autism is not in the medical books. Maybe in recent times they have started to put it in, but in the past it wasn't in the medical books. It's seen as a new developmental disorder, and it's been around a very long time. It's just that diagnosis is difficult because it is what we call invisible disorder. You see the child, everything looks okay, and you say, what is wrong? So, and in our cultural environment, the first thing we will say is it's a spiritual attack, or somebody is after me, or it's a mental health issue, which most of the time it isn't. You can work with children with autism by doing this and that. So what are the signs? That's what we will now talk about. Some of the signs are walking on tippy toes, staying away from other children. That is social interaction. Social communication. The child does not understand when you say without, or that is telling you that stop. The child doesn't understand when you say that. So you must say stop. And eye contact is another thing that you would notice that something is not quite right. This child, every time he's talking to you, is either looking down or looking sideways. Then hyperactivity. The child is hyperactive, jumping from one thing to the other, from one activity to another without completing any. Attachment to an object, attachment to a car, a toy, a fidgety toy, or wanting to have bottle tops, you know, all these caps, these bottle caps, picking everything around it and then holding on to it. The child is a picky eater, does not eat certain types of food, will only stay with either pureed food or crunchy food. You know, the child does not like messy environment. You put the child in the middle of sand play, the child gets very agitated and anxiety begins to set in. Oversensitivity to sound, the child tends to cover his ears to loud noises and gets irritated when they are in a crowd. So you see meltdown or behavioral tantruming when you are in a crowded environment because they can't process all the information that the environment is throwing at them at the same time. So rather than try to filter it out, they don't have the ability to filter it out. So you find the child highly hyperactive and just, you know, having meltdown. So those are some of the signs. And the most important sign, the child is not speaking. That's usually it. At 2 years old, the child is not speaking, there's something wrong. Go straight to your medical doctor to find this. And if you're in a remote area, you don't have medical doctors that can diagnose appropriately. Look for a speech and language therapist that can help you, you know, or look for centers like ours around you that will do an assessment. What we do is a needs assessment. What are we seeing that this child is struggling with and what do we need to put in to support that child? So we'll do a needs assessment if we don't have a diagnosis to say, okay, let's try speech and language therapy while we wait to find somebody that will be able to do the diagnosis. Because early intervention is key. The earlier we start working with the child, the better the turnout of that child. The easier it is to manage that child in different environments. My inspiration of Patrick's came from my personal experience. My son was diagnosed at 2.5, and he did go through all the therapies that we were having at Patrick's, and he did very well. He came out really well. Today he's a mathematician. He made a first class in maths and he's lecturing in maths. So that tells you that all these things I said in 1 second, it wasn't a smooth journey. If you must know, it was a difficult journey, it was a painful journey, but still it was a journey, and we are still, you know, work in progress, getting ourselves, you know, in different areas of his need. He's still, you know, he's still not a very friendly talker, if you must say. He can socially interact with you, he can tell you about the things he does, but still his friends, that you can count his friends on one hand. You know, so those are some of the attributes you see. They are gentle, they are on their own. If they know how to self-regulate some of the things that they go through, they will do well in the community. The parents face many challenges. The first challenge is financial. Many of them don't have enough resources, you know, to be able to give the child the right therapy that is needed. And then sometimes you have autism comorbiding with things like ADHD, comorbiding with things like Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, or even epileptic disorder. So you see that sometimes it could be multifaceted depending on what that child is presenting. So financial is the major one. In developed countries, these children are really taken care of by the government. But as you know, in our Nigeria of today, we are praying to God that one day you know, they will listen to our plight, and then we are the parents are the ones that would actually, fight for services for their children. Another is social impact. That is when they are ostracized, either by the family or by the marriage or even by the community that they live in. They'll say, oh, don't go near that child, oh, he or she is going to give you something, or something is wrong, and the religious connotation that we pair some of these differences with, or this disorder or disability, or whatever language you want to use. The social and religious part of it, where they say, oh, take him to church, oh, he needs deliverance, So those are some of the things that gives anxiety to the parents, most especially to the mothers. Everybody goes through it sometimes, but most especially we know that it's the mothers that suffer the most when it comes to supporting these children. Then we have other areas where, like in the community, the child is not readily engaged or readily accepted by family members, and you find the mother-in-law say, we've never seen this kind of child in my family, and that increases the anxiety of the mother and increases a lot of challenges that she faces as a person. So those are the challenges they face, and how can they mitigate against it? So one of the ways is that find the right support. There are many support groups coming up here and there. I mean, you talked about the Super Mom. We have a parents forum that we work with at Patrick's. There are so many autism awareness campaigns all over social media now. When we first started, they were not there. But now, everybody is coming up with one thing or the other to support family. Find a support group. Find somebody in your community that has walked this road before, that can hold your hand and help you through this. Find centers. Some centers take children free of charge for children that have various developmental delays. We do too, but our scholarship scheme is always full. Before we lose another person has come up. So we do too, because we understand that not all families will be able to afford services. So we also consider some of these parents, and the ones that cannot come to us, we send them to our parents forum, where they can, get some form of support, either from us, because there's always a specialist on that forum every day, or from other parents that have walked the road before. So find somebody in your community that can give you positive vibes. Also, find somebody in your family that can understand the plight of your child. Don't be embarrassed to talk about what your child is going through. Another thing that happens is that parents don't want to tell others, so that they don't label, they are ashamed of the challenge that their child is facing. Find somebody that is likely to understand your plight, and let that person support you positively. Somebody that gives you positive vibes, somebody that encourages you, somebody that you can leave the child with, and you also get a life. Because we find that most parents don't even have a life. Their life is dependent on that child, but you need that respite time for you to be able to regain some of your mental health as well. So those are the areas in which you can find support. When we talk about awareness, it's happening all over the world. You'll be amazed when we go for conferences and people in the UK and the US are telling you that people look at them somehow when they take their children out. So it's human behavior. Maybe it's more in our society because of lack of understanding, of lack of knowledge, but it's all over the world. It's human behavior. It's your responsibility as a parent to teach that person what is the matter with your child. I'll give you an example. At the airport, there was this elderly lady that was sitting on a chair, and a young boy went and sat quite close to that elderly woman. And the elderly woman told the mother of the boy that, why don't you tell your child that it is rude to sit so close to somebody else? There should be proximity. So the lady said, oh, sorry, ma, he has autism. That is why he does not understand proximity, and he does not understand distance. So that is why he's sitting so close to you. So she encouraged the boy, please move a little bit away from Mama. And the woman said to her, oh, I'm very sorry. I didn't know that he had autism. So those are subtle ways in which we can encourage others to understand the challenges our children are, especially because autism is an invisible disorder. You cannot see anything from the facial presentation, from the physical presentation that something is wrong. Everything that is wrong is done through behavior and through interaction and through communication. The debate between mainstream school and special school is very deep because there are various ways you can look at it. I'll give you a scenario. A 10-year-old boy in nursery 1, does that child belong in mainstream school or a special school? The child is not gaining anything from the mainstream school. So it's better for you to find a specialized environment where his needs can be met. A child that has cerebral palsy, for instance, or has autism, for instance, and is learning in the mainstream school environment, but still have some of his quirks, does that child belong to a special school? No, the child is coping very well in the mainstream school and can get support and can even learn from his peers if the mainstream school is equipped to support that child in his area of need. So what does the mainstream school need to do? They need to look at the accommodations that they can put in place. What kind of class should he be? Where should he be sitting in the class? What kind of visual arrangement do we have in the school to support him? And then they look at differentiation. Okay, he's in this class with 15 children. What is his learning capability? Do we need to step down his learning or do we need to step up his learning depending on where he is in the mainstream school? So you really need to, it's the child's ability that should dictate where that child should be. It shouldn't be what the parents want. It's what the child is able to do effectively, independently at an early age. So you're looking at effectiveness, you're looking at independence, and you're looking at an early age. The earlier we make them independent, the better they will turn out in the community. The earlier we find the strength, what that child can do on his own without the support of anybody, without a shadow teacher, without anybody, and then we start to build on it. We start to polish it. We start to enhance it. We start to look for tools that can help us manage that child effectively, and that child will reach his or her full potential. That should always be our goal. For the parents, my charge to them is that it's not a death sentence. Having a child that has autism is not a death sentence. It's just a difference. Look at it as a difference. And how he learns. How does he learn? What can I put in place? How can I support him? Can I look at his nutrition? Because nutrition is also very big. What is he eating? How can I make my kitchen organic friendly to support my child with autism? Do it slowly. Do it. There are so many ways in which you can do it effectively without having to spend too much money. Also, the government can look at centers such as ours or centers all over the place and give support. If they give us enough support, we can take families, as many families as we can to continue to help them to do well with their children. They can also give a lot of tax breaks to some of these companies or these organizations to say, okay, if you support so and so place, we'll reduce your tax burden, because we are taking on the responsibility of the government. So why shouldn't we be supported in the work that we do? So these are some of the things that the government can do. They can also improve their own centers through public-private partnership to see how they can improve those centers for more families to be able to get the services. The centers are there, but the services are poor. So it's how to build up those services to a place of excellence, to a capacity of quality service to families that will determine, how well these families can even step into those centers to get the right best practices, more or less.